grooming can be a really great bonding ritual for you and your dog. You know, it's a moment that allows you to kind of like slow down and really connect with your pet.
I wish I saw more pets that smelled brilliant in like the cafe and Whole Foods where I'm shopping constantly and the dogs are like all over me. Alex Pauly, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Super excited to have you. We are very interested in what you've been embarking on lately with see what I did there with your new brand Biche, which is Beauty for the Beast. So we're talking all things dog today, but pet grooming in general, you know, what's going on in that space, and just wanted to ask you first if you could introduce yourself and what your brand is.
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm the founder of Biche. It's a luxury pet grooming brand, and we're all about bringing beauty industry standards to the world of pet grooming. So that means really clean formulas that are developed with a veterinarian, sophisticated scent that is pet friendly, but also, you know, actually smells good, and then elevated packaging that you won't just kind of end up like hiding away in your closet.
Because why did you start this brand?
I mean, the main driving force behind it was really just not being able to find any pet grooming products in the market that worked for me or my dog. I mean, you as cat owners can probably relate to this, but you know, you walk into like your local pet supply store or a bigger box retailer, and it's just a wall full of products that are essentially identical. Just visually, you know, they're packaged like cleaning products. A lot of times they're even in the same aisle as like Clorox, Windex, etc. Then when you actually go to smell them, they often smell like cleaning products, which is a big pain point for me, like coming from a beauty background and being someone who loves fragrance. It always really frustrated me. And then when we actually go to use them, the formulas themselves are really harsh. You know, they're drying out my dog's skin, they're drying out his fur, they're giving him issues like dandruff. A lot of times, like when I would use a dog shampoo, it would even like dry out the skin on my own hands. So I realized, you know, these products are not being made with the animal or the human in mind. And, you know, I was kind of coming to all these realizations as I was also working in beauty as an editor. And, you know, maybe we'll talk about it more later, but, you know, as an editor, one of the amazing perks is just getting sent all this product and having the chance to test out all these amazing brands and just kind of seeing how, you know, in the human beauty space, people are really raising the bar in terms of like formula, function, branding, and aesthetic. So I was seeing all these amazing human beauty brands and being like, okay, well, why isn't anyone doing the same thing for our dogs? So that was kind of where the
It's kind of crazy that we've gone from like, you know, in beauty, peptide stacking, and I remember like all those commercials where it was like hyaluronic acid, you know, like it was like, oh my God, we're finally talking about ingredients now and stuff. But I think for pet grooming, I couldn't name you a single thing in like a pet product.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I'm curious too, like what did the development process look like in terms of like bringing the like beauty editor background in, and like you were mentioning you worked with a veterinarian to like actually develop the product. So like what did it mean to like merge those two disciplines, I guess, in practice?
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty similar to the process of developing like a human beauty product. Obviously, you know, you're making it for a dog. So you want to make sure that, you know, it's not too harsh because human skin has a different pH level than dog skin. That was one thing I learned, was that dog skin is more neutral or alkaline, which means it's a lot more sensitive. So you kind of have to treat it like baby skin almost. And so, yeah, I wanted to make sure that we were really developing it for the dog first. So I knew that we had to be working with a veterinary advisor. So I found a vet dermatologist. Her name is Dr. Joy Griffin. And because she has the dermatology specialty, she has really that knowledge in terms of, okay, you know, what ingredients are potentially going to irritate my dog's skin and what's going to be really good and, you know, nourishing for the dog.
And what were the issues? Like, did you have any issues when you were developing the products in terms of making it work both in terms of like efficacy and also adding this like layer of a beautiful scent? Like, how did it work to kind of develop the scent part of it and kind of incorporate that so it became something more than like the sum of its parts, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest challenge we ran into was just kind of finding a balance between making sure the scent was perceptible to the human while also still being really gentle and making sure that it wouldn't overwhelm the dogs. Obviously, dogs have really sensitive noses. So yeah, like hitting that middle ground where, as the human user, you're still going to get that really nice, sensorial spa-like experience. But it's not going to, linger on the dog too long. It's not going to overwhelm them. Because usually like in a human eau de parfum, for example, is, it's the concentration of fragrance oil is like 15 to 20%. For dogs, you really don't want to go over 2%. So we kind of kept the limit or the range between like 0.5 and 1.5% fragrance oil concentration. So we kind of did a lot of mods like at different percentages. And, in the beginning, there, like, for example, like our first mod, it was great. And, the scent seemed like it was, just the right amount. But the fragrance oil was actually like separating from the base formula. So we had to kind of go back and make some tweaks to the base formula because what happens with fragrance oils, it needs surfactants to kind of cling onto. And surfactants, obviously, in some cases, they can be very harsh and like stripping. So we kind of limited the amount and the types of surfactants that we were using. So we had to do like a lot of trial and error in terms of finding that right fragrance balance.
I find it so fascinating that, like, again, I think this is such a new space that you're kind of charting because you worked with a master perfumer, right?
She's a senior perfumer.
Okay, senior perfumer, excuse me, I should know this, to develop the fragrance itself. Can you talk about like what that process was like?
Yeah, so we worked with a fragrance developer. His name is Carlos Hubert. He's the founder of a fragrance brand called Arquiste. So he was our developer. And then our actual perfumer was Christina Christie. So she's a senior perfumer at Givaudan. So I would say Carlos's role was kind of like creative directing the scent. So, I had a general concept behind, the feelings and, the general references and the types of notes that I was leaning toward. Generally, I had this vision of creating a scent inspired by Andy Warhol's Dachshund. He had this really iconic dachshund named Archie that he would like bring everywhere with him to like Studio 54 and, art gallery openings and dinners and everything. And I wanted to create a scent inspired by this really iconic kind of like cultural, like companion to this like cultural icon. So I went to Carlos with that vision and he kind of took it and translated it to the perfumer who then was able to, from like a scientific standpoint and like chemistry standpoint, kind of translate that into the actual formula.
And when you were working with that perfumer, did they come with like different versions first, or did you already be like, oh, I want it to have notes of fig and hay? Or
yeah, I kind of already knew that I wanted it to feel soft, but also crisp at the same time, because these are products that are like cleaning a pet. So people have certain expectations around what kinds of notes should be like in a shampoo. It's not something where people are like, oh yeah, I want like a really resinous, like I want like an oud shampoo. That's just like, it doesn't give that feeling of clean, quote unquote. So I knew that I wanted it to feel, cozy and comforting and nostalgic, but also still, contemporary and fresh. So I could kind of thrown around the idea of fig. I personally really like fig. I think it's like a really versatile note and it has like that slight sweetness while still being kind of creamy and lactonic and kind of, like comforting. Also, a lot of the kind of scent references that I had brought to Carlos were also sandalwood fragrances. So that was another note that we kind of landed on. And then Carlos kind of came up with this idea of bringing in a little bit like of a powdery aspect. So kind of referencing, like old-fashioned cosmetic formulas. If you think of like an old, like a vintage face compact or something like that. So we kind of brought that to the perfumer, and she, like in the first round, she came up with, I think it was 9 different directions that we could go in. So I smelled through all of them, and I would say that the one we landed on was probably the closest, like on paper, to what Carlos and I had originally discussed.
That's so cool.
Really cool. Yeah. And I guess like zooming forward in the process of development, like as you are, you know, like once you had the product developed and like you've obviously like put all of this effort and like expertise into like creating both the shampoo and the oil, I'm curious how you then approached like be it investors, stockists, with sort of like the idea that there was a market for a product like this, because I think it's interesting. Like we know as pet owners, like the amount of care and love that you put into your pets. And then also as someone who like cares about beauty products, that like you would mind and have concern about like what's being put onto your body. But I'm curious how you made the case to people who maybe like don't have that necessarily, like that reference point. Like what was like a salient stat? Like, was there a salient stat to them, or like how did you sort of frame the idea of this audience existing in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers around pet spending are like pretty crazy. In 2025, it hit 154 billion in just the US.
Wow.
So that's annual pet spending. And just back in 2018, it was 90 billion. So it's really grown a lot. You know, 66% of US households own a pet. It's majority dogs. So I think those stats alone are really powerful. But then you also look at kind of how the pet industry has evolved and has kind of shifted towards, you know, premiumization and luxurification. And I think that also really, for a lot of investors, I think like speaks for itself, because we've already seen this happen with pet food. Like
Unkibble or whatever that thing is. I keep seeing those ads for like Unkibble. Is that what it's called? Do you know what I'm
I mean, the
about?
farmer's dog.
Farmer's dog, probably.
The farmer's dog is like the prime kind of like North Star example of, you know, brands and consumers kind of realizing like, our dogs deserve the same quality of products as we're using. So I feel like, you know, pet food kind of really led that charge. I mean, there's now, I feel like the premium, you know, fresh, human grade dog food space is so saturated now. There's so many brands that are doing it. So I feel like that kind of set off that wave. And then I think we saw it kind of extend into pet accessories, you know, with brands like Wild One, and also like pet furniture. So, you know, really like elevated, nice looking pet crates for the home, pet beds, stuff like that. And I think now, as kind of we're increasingly humanizing our pets, I think it's, you know, kind of taking things to the next level and pushing it more into like the luxury space versus the premium and prestige space.
I find it so fascinating to talk about like premium versus luxury and how like what does luxury even mean now that, I don't know, there's all these things, especially like in fashion, like the growth in China has slowed down and Gucci is showing in Times Square like these kind of Zara knockoff clothes and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm curious like what your take is on that and if it just means something different in like the pet beauty space that I guess is quite nascent still. But yeah, like how do you kind of determine what luxury is in pet grooming versus like how does it work in the overall conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think the luxury pet grooming space is still relatively new. I think it is still a white space. So not a lot of brands really are already doing it, which is why I think it's so exciting. But I think for luxury, I think it kind of is about, you know, tapping into the emotional aspects of pet ownership and kind of really touching on like that animal-human bond. So I think like for us, it was always really important to, you know, obviously pet grooming is preventative care. It prevents a whole host of physical health issues, but it was really important for us to reframe grooming from this thing that you traditionally see as like a chore into something that's really enjoyable, kind of like a spa-like experience for both the pet as well as the human. And also kind of touching on, you know, the fact that grooming can be a really great bonding ritual for you and your dog. You know, it builds trust, you know, there's the touch that's involved, obviously, is really important. So yeah, I think kind of moving away from seeing it as like, oh, it's this thing I have to do like when my dog gets dirty to, you know, oh, this is actually something that you can like look forward to. And it's a moment that allows you to kind of like slow down and really connect with your pet.
Mm-hmm. I wish I saw more pets that smelled brilliant in like the cafe and Whole Foods where I'm shopping constantly and the dogs are like all over me.
Dogs at Whole Foods?
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. Like,
I have not seen
I think
these.
the other day at AMC I saw a dog and I'm like, is your dog seeing the Sheep Detectives? Because what is it doing here? I don't know if you saw that Curbed article too about like dogs dogs, where should they be? Where should they not be?
Do you have a take on where dogs should and should not be?
I mean, like the article touched on, there are definitely a lot of dog owners that act really entitled, just like there are a lot of like parents of human kids that act really entitled. So it's unfortunate because I think it gives like everyone who's trying to be responsible and respectful a bad rap.
Yeah.
Like you were saying about Whole Foods, like I live near Trader Joe's and people are constantly bringing their dogs in, even though there's like a huge sign in front that's like no dogs unless they're service dogs.
Yeah.
So I mean, I probably err on the side of caution when it comes to like taking my dog into places that they maybe like wouldn't normally be allowed. If it's like a coffee shop and there are other dogs in there, it's like okay. Or sometimes if it's like a tight space, like I'll pick my dog up and bring him in versus just like letting him be on the floor. But yeah, I think it's situational also. You need to like you just use your best judgment. Yeah.
Come on, people. Put two P's together.
Yeah. No, like I feel like nobody knows the actual legal rules of the subway where your dog has got to be in a carrier of some kind.
Yeah. They like technically have to be in a bag. So I do have a bag for my dog. But obviously it's harder when you have like a huge dog.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't bother me as someone who loves dogs, but
my thing is like, and I'm not ranking on dogs here, love dogs, but when people like yesterday, I saw this woman walking her dog and it kind of like, it didn't lunge or anything. It just kind of turned towards somebody who was walking near it. And the person kind of like recoiled and the owner was like, oh, she's friendly. Like, don't worry, she's friendly. And it's like, I don't care if she's friendly or if she hates people. Like, why does that, why is that the ultimate like go-to thing?
Yeah, it's like, don't worry about the lunging at all.
Yeah, like maybe she has a phobia of dogs. I don't know. But like, I just find that to be kind of egregious.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, it's like, I mean, I've never had a kid, so I guess I can't really speak for other parents.
Do you have child phobia?
No, I feel like it's a similar thing where it's kind of like embarrassing when your dog, misbehaves in public or your kid misbehaves in public and you don't really want to like have to discipline them. So instead you kind of like make a little excuse and you're like, oh, they don't mean it or whatever, but
Totally valid.
Well, I guess on that topic, I think like, which, pivoting a little bit from dog policy, dog etiquette, but like, I think something Trey and I were talking about was like so much of current pet product on the market is like very kid coded, if that makes sense. And like, I think it is sort of in response, perhaps, and maybe this is like psychoanalyzing the pet care industry too much, but like, I feel like a lot of discussion around pet ownership, particularly of like millennials and Gen Z, is like, these are people who are like having pets in lieu of the baby. This is like dink couple stuff, and I think.
Which, just clarify for listeners, is double
income, no kids.
Oh, dual income, no kids.
And there's DINKWAD, which is dual income, no kids with a dog.
Oh, okay.
Wow, DINKWADs. Yeah. DINKWAD sounds like slightly slurish.
I know. Would you identify as a DINKWAD?
I do think it's interesting kind of like talking about like the pivot into luxury, because like so much pet product is like little toys with like smiley faces on them. And it's like very
it's
kid
so
toy coded. And it can be, I think, quite infantilizing. And like there's something interesting, I think, in your product both is like, yes, like a pivot of like, here's how these two trends intersect between like people caring more and more about like the products that they use and the products that they are giving to their pet. But I think it's also like a reframe of like, no, my pet isn't like my furry child. Like my pet is like this extension of like myself and my taste too, to some extent. And it's like, I think even to the behavioral thing, it's like my expectation around my pet is that it's like an extension of me that I can take to a nice place versus it's like my fur baby that I'm like taking around in like a push stroller. No shade to the push stroller industry. I'm not sure the DINKWADs.
The DINKWADs, the push stroller.
I'm curious what you make of that. Like
I've definitely noticed that the majority of pet products on the market, they do look like kids products. And a lot of times, with the branding, it's, like little paws and like tails, or it's like a like a cutesy name. And I definitely, with Biche, I really wanted to get away from that and create something that felt a lot more sophisticated, something that like if you saw it on the shelf you might kind of do a double take and you'd be like, oh wait, but that actually, like, is that a product for me or is it actually a product for my dogs? Because I think we're at a point where everything we buy kind of becomes an extension of our personal style and aesthetic. And, I think for a lot of people, myself included, like looking at the pet grooming aisle, there's really nothing in there that really resonated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you were saying, and I mean, you were like the product backs it up to the extent that like you can use the shampoo as a person.
Yeah, you can.
Like, which I feel like is an interesting thing. Like, I feel like I would never think about like sharing a
everything shower with
yeah,
your dog.
Exactly. Like it is kind of an interesting thing, like the way that, and I don't know, I read something, I don't know if you're familiar with this stat, that like all pet food actually technically has to be human grade. Did you know about this?
No.
Like it can't be poisonous to people.
Well, oh, okay. So like if you ate it.
Like if you ate it, you would be fine.
What I wonder, is this like an RFK Jr. rule or like...
I don't know. I just read about it and I thought it was interesting. But
well,
like
the other part of that, sorry to like mention RFK and both the spirit, but the FDA is technically the body of jurisdiction over all beauty and like pet, I assume, stuff as well.
So pet is interesting. It's not even regulated as a cosmetic.
Wow.
It's a very unregulated industry, which I think is why we see a lot of, kind of subpar products coming onto the market. So we really wanted to make sure that we were formulating, to kind of like the same standards that, for example, like a Clean at Sephora, for example, would be looking for. But yeah, no, pet is there's like almost no regulation around it.
About the human grade food thing, or is it like anything pet related is not really regulated in America?
Oh, I mean specifically for pet grooming.
Okay.
Pet grooming is very not regulated.
Well, it's interesting because even when you were saying like a certain amount of fragrance is like not safe for pets, just like anecdotally, I feel like when like my mom takes her dog to the groomer or something, I feel like the smell is so strong afterwards. So it's like, it's interesting that like
the once a year kind of like sanitation bleach thing.
Yeah, but it's like crazy that like, because I'm like, if I can smell it like that strongly, like it's definitely not what you're saying. It's like got to be 2% or whatever.
Yeah,
else.
I mean there are definitely brands that are using a higher concentration, but then you kind of compromise on the formula.
Yeah,
and kind of the harshness of the formula,
and like your dog's safety.
Yeah,
surely.
I mean, and their comfort, and on the plus side, you get a fragrance that maybe has better longevity. It lingers a little bit more. It's like nicer for the human potentially, but on the downside, it's maybe not ideal for the dog.
Yeah.
Well, because you've kind of identified this white space, and I think there are very few brands, as you mentioned, that are kind of doing it. I know Aesop has like a dog line, right?
They have a dog shampoo that they just kind of did like a campaign relaunching it recently. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah.
But it was interesting timing. I feel like everyone's kind of obsessed with pets now.
And because of that, are you witnessing and, going to different stockists who potentially could carry Biche to potential investors? Are you also feeling the excitement that you feel around this new space, or is it been kind of an uphill battle for you to be like, you guys, this is the next best thing, like I'm inventing? How has it been?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think like overall in terms of, like on the business side of things, maybe with like investors and other people, like people are really excited about pet and they see the potential. I think in terms of just Biche's positioning, because it is kind of on the border of like pet grooming, but then also like human beauty, and it really like treads the line. So I think some maybe beauty retailers see it and they're like, oh, well, this is a pet product, we don't sell pet. So I think it's just going to take some time for them to see. I think this is just the beginning really of kind of a larger trend that's going to, continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might just take some time and like proof of concept. But, there are other retailers that have reached out that I think are seeing just so much interest in pet. They've been like introducing, a pet category as part of like their home goods offerings and things like that. So yeah, I think it's kind of case dependent.
Mm-hmm. Because one of my favorite topics is like when you are trying to position your product as sort of premium or luxury in an existing market, there's not really a lot of places to go. Like you want massive distribution and awareness, obviously, that like an Amazon could bring, and which we know is kind of like trying to become more of a premium destination for these products. But, as like a luxury brand, you want to be in something like a Bloomingdale's or like a, Bergdorf's or like a Violet Grey or something like that, which obviously, to your point, doesn't really cater to pet grooming. So how do you convince them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. We'll see. Honestly, like I don't have a great answer for that.
Or alternatively, are you trying to target more of these like beauty premium stockists versus like having it at like Petco or something?
Yeah. I think retail is really kind of like a positioning play right now because the majority of our sales are D2C. So I think it's about kind of just showing up in places where people are already investing in beauty and wellness for themselves. So that is, like you're saying, more of these like luxury multi-brand retailers, like hopefully one day, like a Violet Grey. We're on Mode Operandi right now. We're launching at Revolve. Like Bergdorf's, the department stores, things like that.
I'm curious to that too, like how you're thinking about like discovery and stuff, because I feel like in the beauty space, at least, like social media has become like just like a huge way that people are starting to like find out about beauty products at all. Like obviously like retail still matters and all of that. And I think especially for like a more upscale product for sure. But I'm curious too, which we like didn't touch on in like the launch portion of this, but like you also launched like the Biche socials well before the product was there, and sort of like, I don't know if that was also sort of part of like the building in public kind of approach of like getting people on board with the idea of the product and like the idea of what it's standing for before it like exists in the world. So like I'm aware this is like a bit of a two-part type of question, but like how are you thinking about like getting the word out there around Biche, especially knowing that it's like it's DTC, but it's also like more upscale. Like I'm sure you're not just like blasting people with like whatever like random influencer stuff. So like how are you thinking about that side of the business?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the social media portion, I knew that it was really important to kind of establish the social presence like well before we had any product available. So I was actually just looking at our Instagram earlier today, and I think we started posting in February of last year, and obviously we just launched in April. So yeah, I mean, I think the purpose behind that was really just like building out the world, and making sure that when people, do come to the page, they understand, okay, this is kind of the vibe, this is the aesthetic, this is like the type of customer that they're going after. And, I think also part of that was launching this editorial series that we do called Off Leash, which is where we kind of feature like taste-making dogs and their humans. And it's like a quick kind of questionnaire. It's kind of like, like the Proust questionnaire or like the Cosmo quiz, but more for like dogs and their people. So yeah, I think just building out the world and also making our social a place of discovery where it's, even if we didn't have product, that you could click and buy, we were still kind of curating this page where you could discover, oh, like I didn't know like that this artist had a dog, or, oh, this is like a really iconic like dog from film or art history or whatever. Because I think when you do that, it feels like you're selling less and more kind of like serving the audience.
I think that's such an interesting approach. And obviously you have an editorial background yourself in beauty. You were an editor at High Snobiety. I think like that kind of building out of this world is like probably a really interesting strategy, but how much of it was a strategy for you versus just like, I know how to tell a story really well and build out the world that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was both. I think it definitely was strategy, but it's also, like you said, just kind of like naturally what I'm good at. And I think like coming from the editorial background, I've always like really valued and understood the importance of storytelling when you're launching a brand and a product, because coming at it from an editor's POV, I was thinking, okay, well, what would kind of like be the through line in the press release, or what's going to catch an editor's eye? Because I think if the story isn't compelling for someone to like want to write about it, then, you have an issue.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I was just curious, like, because I feel like it's interesting, even like with the side projects pivot, like what people seize upon that, like you, even as like the person being involved, you're like, oh, like, yeah, sure, I guess. Like, was there like any pivot, like when you were sort of first thinking about Biche of like, I think this is really the selling point or what makes this interesting? And then like when editors or influencers or whoever was coming to you, they were like, no, we really want to know more about like this particular piece. Like, were there any kind of like surprising moments in that?
Not necessarily in terms of like the positioning. I will say, like, this is a little unrelated, but one thing that's been surprising since we launched was seeing where the majority of our orders are coming from. Because obviously going in, I was like, okay, it's going to be, New York, LA, it's going to be coastal, it's going to be, young people, not necessarily Gen Z young, but more like, millennials. And since we've launched, we are getting orders from New York and LA, but a lot of it is really from, Chicago, Midwest, and also the South. So the Carolinas have been really big. So
shout out the Carolinas.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
Dog country.
Yeah.
No country.
I mean, I'm curious, like, to that point, like, how close have you been with like the people that are buying? Like, are you reaching out to them? Like, are you talking with them about the product? Like, have you learned anything sort of from the buyers of Biche?
Yeah, I mean, I try to, with like email marketing, which I don't work with anyone on that, so it's just me doing it myself. I'm trying to kind of build that rapport and the relationship with the customer. And obviously, if we do get people who reach out to like our customer care line, like I always make sure to respond. We had someone, for example, reach out and they're like, do you do like a veterans discount? And I was like, we don't, but like I'll just create this code for you. And she was so thankful. She was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like you've got a customer for life. So I think it is really important to just have that personal connection. And with people who DM us, for example, like I always try to reply, like interact with, people who tag us in the stories and all of that stuff. I mean, one thing that's been also like a pleasant surprise coming from our customers that the majority of orders have been for the two products together. So yeah, I mean, it's great just kind of from like an economics perspective because you're increasing the average order value. But I think it is like testament to the fact that people are like wanting to invest in, better grooming products for themselves and their dog.
We wanted to ask you also about, what we've been seeing obviously across like consumer packaged goods for over a decade now, basically, but like the premiumization of kind of everyday staples with like the rise of Graza oil, and just like what's it called? Chaos packaging. I'm not even sure if that's related, to be honest, but even like prebiotic sodas and things like that, where we're just kind of like rebranding or making better things that are already, in existence technically, but like, do you feel like Biche is sort of part of that lineage, I guess? Or do you think that's like a different thing completely?
No, I mean, I think we're definitely in that ecosystem for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's kind of all kind of ties back to just like the uncertain times that we live in, I guess, to put it lightly. And people, maybe not being able to afford buying a house, but they can like treat themselves to this little thing. So it's kind of like this like little treat kind of economy that's emerging. And I think also like people just wanting to feel like these physical products in their lives, are special, and kind of like, ritualizing like their consumption habits in a way.
I think that's so fascinating because I never thought you would say that, but also I do feel like because of how things have gone with social media, everything now is content, regardless of if you're an influencer or not. Like if I am posting on my Instagram story, of course I want, the background and the objects within the mise en scène to be like more curated as to show off who I am. If I were flexing on social, which I can't say that like I'm immune to, right? And in the same way, I think that like it's most important to have everything be like an objet d'art kind of thing. But I'm curious if you like approach the formulation of your brand and like the manufacturing in that same vein. Like I know you have an interesting kind of bottle design and stuff like that. Was it intentional to kind of be shown off?
Yeah, I definitely thought about, okay, how is this going to look like on TikTok or on someone's Instagram feed when they share it. And so I think for our packaging, it was really about just kind of getting away from what all of these pet grooming brands have traditionally done, which is typically like pretty minimal. It's like, for the shampoos, it's, straight kind of up and down cylinder bottle, or it's like a larger tub that has a pump. I've really never loved how pump bottles look. So really wanted to get away from that and create something that was, like softer and a little bit more sculptural and like felt like tactile, like something that you do, like that you want to engage with. And then for the oil, coming from my beauty background and just being a huge fragrance fan, I wanted it to be reminiscent of a fragrance bottle that, wouldn't look like out of place on your vanity or wherever, you might display your beauty products at home.
It's so interesting. I mean, because it makes like obviously like total sense. Like if you're trying to have like a premium or luxury product that you want the packaging to be good. But I think a lot of brands, and I think sometimes beauty brands, sometimes food brands, like do get that part of it like pretty consistently wrong, if that makes sense, of like, oh, we're telling them it's like an amazing formula, it's an amazing this, and like the product is like the product itself like does not feel good to hold or to touch. And like I think, which sounds a little bit odd, but like I do think that people still kind of underestimate that to some extent, of like that perfume, or it's not even it's the oil, it's the coat oil, but like it does sort of have that feeling to it. I guess I'm curious, like what beyond perfume or anything else, like were there other sort of like design discipline, like things that you were pulling on, like to Trey's point about like everything sort of becoming like an art object, like thinking about Andy Warhol, thinking about other things, like what was sort of on the reference board, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of our logo, for example, I always knew I wanted it to be a crest to kind of, reference, history and heritage. But I also didn't want it to feel like too old fashioned and stuffy. Mm-hmm. So I think we hit a really nice balance between, having that really luxurious, elevated feel, but also still feeling contemporary and playful and modern. So, we looked at like a lot of like medieval heraldic imagery of like, the sight hounds like on their hind legs. Mm-hmm. And then we also kind of pulled in some references of like my own dog.
Aww.
Into like the little dog symbol.
Shout out Cam.
Yeah. Because I mean, this brand like really is for him at the end of the day. So I knew I wanted to, sneak him in there somehow. And then in terms of like the actual packaging, I do think it's like lightly Art Deco inspired. So that was another thing. But yeah.
I mean, at no point did she say Y2K, folks.
Thank God.
No. I mean, honestly, but it is like crazy because I feel like so many brands, like when they're thinking about stuff that's like as important or like, germane to the brand as the packaging, they're like, what's trending on TikTok? You know what I mean? Like versus being like, okay, like what does my brand actually stand for? And like what are sort of like some more like enduring symbols that I can like bring into it, which obviously makes a lot of sense from like a luxury and premium standpoint. But I think like even for like a product that wasn't even trying to position itself in that way, it's still important to like have a brand meaning that is not tied to like a social platform, which is more just like a rant.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, and I'm curious, like in looking across like that sort of premiumized product lane more broadly, like were there products, and maybe even from like a luxury standpoint, like were there products that you were thinking of, like not like that's the goal, but like that is like a version of success that you would want, or like a scale of success that you would aspire to if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, there are tons of beauty brands specifically that I really look up to and admire, particularly in terms of like how they've built out their social presence. So, for example, Crown Affair is a big one. Everything that they do feels really intentional and like artful, I guess, in a way, which I really appreciate. Merit is another one. I love their social content. And then, unfortunately, like Rhode is amazing marketing.
We don't make the rules, folks.
Yeah. What do you think is next for not only Biche, but like the space at large? Like, where is pet grooming headed?
Yeah, I think the pet industry at large is really just going to be pushing more towards the luxury space. And, I think we're seeing this where, these 5-star hotels are, introducing pet packages and like pet services where your pet is greeted with like a custom robe and a bed and like a curated little menu. I mean, we also see it like similarly kind of in the hospitality and travel sector with, these private charter flights that are pet friendly. So, there's like Bark Air, for example. There's Retrieve Air. They all specialize in pet friendly flights that, start at many thousands of dollars. And then we also see it with, pet tech and pet health with these companies coming out with, like longevity solutions for your dog. And that is all, I think, it's just going to get crazier and crazier and more expensive and more expensive.
I mean, I would much rather fly with like 10 dogs than one baby.
Just 10 really nice smelling dogs.
Right. Last question for you. Can you give us an offline recommendation? So restaurant, book, movie, dog.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, this is dog related. There's a great book that I recently read called, you might need to fact check this after, but I think it's called Who's a Good Boy? Can I look it up just to make sure I'm saying it right? I don't want to butcher the title.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called Who's a Good Dog?
Oh, nice.
And it's by Jessica Pierce. And it's about how we've kind of come to control all aspects of our dogs' lives in terms of like, when they go to the bathroom, down to, when their meal times are, down to what exactly they're eating. And she kind of makes the case for like loosening the reins a little bit. And in some cases, like not training your dog as much as, some professionals might recommend. So it's interesting. It gets into kind of like the ethics around owning a pet and, control and routine and kind of instances in which you can kind of maybe loosen the reins and just like let your dog be a dog.
Wow, very nice.
Amazing.
Inspiring.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find Biche?
You can find Biche at our website, which is www.biche.world. And then you can find us on social media at biche.world.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
That was a woof.